December and January 2024. Do stand by for that. Meanwhile, a lot of discussions going on this morning. It is only 11 days to Christmas, but the headlines are not looking that celebratory. Let's take a look at some of what we'll be looking at in the dailies this morning. On the Daily Nation, a poll there, hustlers the most dissatisfied. Cost of living was a major part of the ruling party's successful 2022 campaign. That's a big headline on the Daily Nation today. On the Standard, blackouts, Ruto cracks the whip. Yes, there was a cabinet meeting yesterday, and this is what came out of that. Other dailies this morning, The Star, Mudavadi Kindiki rated top in Ruto cabinet, and this is another TIFA poll released yesterday. It is something that features on most of the dailies, and probably we take a look at the People Daily as well. Damning survey, yes. Kenya heading in the wrong direction. Latest poll by TIFA shows that vast majority of Kenyans are worse off now economically than they were a year ago. These are just some of the big stories we'll be looking at this morning, so do stand by for that. We have a lot more. In store for you. And yes, we do have one more headline at Taifa Leo, Mawaziri Baridi. That's the CS's ranking from that TIFA poll as well. Mawaziri Kithure Kindiki na Kipchumba Murkomen wajitokeza kama wachapakazi wanaotangamana na raia. Big story this morning. Do stand by for that. You can also chime in through social media on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Let's take a look at the other top stories. Now, the National Treasury has changed tune on the economy's status, saying there is no cash crunch crisis in the government. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u now says he was taken out of context, while his PS, Chris Kiptoo, said the government has already paid out November and December salaries, asserting there is no cash crunch. But as Apollo Kamau reports, economic experts remain skeptical on the change of tune, coming a day after the president said the economy was back on track.
A day after bullish President William Ruto told the nation the economy is back on track, having recovered from the danger of debt distress, the National Treasury, in a curious turn of events, has denied a cash crunch crisis existed in the first place, with Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u saying he was taken out of context. His Principal Secretary, Chris Kiptoo, has also allayed fears of a liquidity crisis, saying the government has paid November salaries.
This issue of salary may have been misunderstood. I confirm to you that all salaries for the November month have been paid fully. I want everybody to know all salaries for the month of November have been fully settled. And we are on course towards settling for December as scheduled. So there should be no cause for alarm.
Most of the time I also see the papers, they analyze things nicely. They provide the right data, but they analyze things the wrong way.
Just last week, CS Ndung'u lamented before MPs how the government is paying salaries with arrears to avoid defaulting on loans, which are falling due, especially the 3 or 5 billion shillings hero bond, which is due in June next year.
I can tell you, we are even having trouble with salaries. We are clearing salaries with arrears. Okay? You know, just imagine that. The first thing we can do, and you are familiar with this story, is that we cannot default on external debt because our credibility is going to be ruined. It takes the first charge.
Order, Honorable Senator.
So, what has changed in a span of 6 days? After last week's walkout by senators over unpaid salaries for their staff for the past 2 months, and members of the National Assembly who stormed out of the chambers over NGCDF, Did the president's assertive speech on the economy force the National Treasury to change tune?
The president is a beacon of hope in the country, and he cannot come to on the national TV and tell people that the economy is not working. Because if he does that, then he's telling us to sack him. Therefore, he has to come in on the national TV and tell us how things are working. But I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is, me and you as a common mwananchi, are we feeling the words of the president in our pockets, in our houses, and also in whatever we are doing in our businesses? And I think the answer is no.
Still, early last week, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, CRA, while appearing before the Budget Committee, warned that revenues, especially from taxes, are likely to continue dropping. The National Treasury and the President in his Jamhuri Day speech did not say how much out of the external and internal debts the government has paid, including the commitment by the President to pay off the first installment of the Eurobond, amounting to 45.8 billion shillings this December. Kenya's public debt portfolio is currently at 10.2 trillion shillings.
We have a problem, an economic problem in the country. And one of the challenges that we have is debt that has to be paid. And I think every coin that the government is making is going to the debt.
Economic experts and the opposition have faulted the government for its loan dalliance with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The two Bretton Woods institutions are largely behind the new taxes in the Finance Act. Apul Kamau, TV47.
Now, despite President William Ruto's assurances to Kenyans that the country's economy, which has been burdened by a substantial public debt, is stable, citizens are still facing challenges with a high cost of essential goods, according to a recent poll. 87% of them have been forced to cut back on their personal spending in response to these economic pressures. Now, according to Kenyans who spoke to TV47, President William Ruto's administration has more to do regarding the cost of living in its target to please the common mwananchi. Mike Kagwongo reports.
Speaking to Kenyans at the 60th Jamhuri Day celebrations in Nairobi's Uhuru Gardens Tuesday, the head of state credited the country's economy recovery to difficult sacrifices made by both Kenyans and his administration, including spending reductions. This to Kenyans has not been felt following a continuous increase of taxes and levies imposed on them.
Consultancy fee of 10,000 shillings.
A substantial 87% of Kenyans, according to recent TIFA research poll, for instance, have been forced to cut back on their personal spending as a result of the financial pressures.
Na tena ukiangalia hawa wanatununulianga hawana pesa. Kwa hivyo hata hawakuji kwa soko, wamekatalia manyumbani. Hata hao ukienda kuwatembelea hakuna kitu yani hakuna kitu ya kukula.
Wanasema hakuna pesa. Vitu yote tunauza bei kali, na watu makikuja makasema ni bei kali.
His Excellency! When he assumed office last year, the president stated that in order to save the nation from an economic meltdown, his administration had to postpone implementing vital development initiatives. Kenyans are expressing worry over President William Ruto's criticism of the previous government's excessive borrowing during the campaign leading up to the general elections. And in a sharp contrast, since assuming power, he has applied for loans from the World Bank, the IMF and other organizations.
Lazima kama rais ucreate jobs katika hii nchi. Si utuambie unataka kutusafirisha, utupeleke huko kama ngambo, Saudi Arabia.
Bei ya chakula imeshuka kidogo sana, aswa unga inaweza kuwa imeshuka, lakini bado kuna mambo mengi ya kufanya.
The steep rise in the cost of living and the faltering economy present a formidable challenge for the Kenya Kwanza administration. Kenyans have been forced to make larger financial sacrifices, especially for the necessities like fuel.
Kuna kitu yenye inafanyika kwa economy yenye inaajiri vijana. Serikali ile mradi ya nyumba yenye serikali ilikuwa ilete ilishapigwa na kotini. So hakuna kazi kwa vijana. Kulikuwa na ile kazi kwa vijana mtaani pia ilianguka.
Sasa mbona rais hajasema ukweli kutuambia uchumi inaenda vibaya? Na pia tuambie kuwa alitudanganya na mambo ya bottom up, kwa sababu kama ulidanganya lazima utoe uongo na ulete ukweli.
Mike GOtv 47, Nairobi.
Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Administration, Professor Kithure Kindiki, has been ranked the best performing CS, while Energy and Petroleum's David Chirchir has been ranked the least performing Cabinet Secretary. This is according to the latest poll by TIFA, which also revealed that President William Ruto is performing badly on reducing debt, corruption, job creation, and cost of living. George Maringa breaks down the numbers for us.
The Kenya Kwanza government remains on the radar of the binoculars of Kenyans and on the weighing scale as well, if the latest poll results are anything to go by. Professor of Law, Interior CS Kithure Kindiki retained his best ranking position as Kenyans believe he is steering the Interior and National Administration docket well. Prime CS and Ministry of Foreign Affairs CS Musalia Mudavadi and Ezekiel Mashogu of Education coming in second and third at 62% and 58% respectively. On the flip side, Davis Chirchir of Energy and Petroleum docket comes in last with a performance rating of 19%. Aisha Jumwa of Gender scored 23%, while Treasury's Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, Zakaria Njero of Water and Sanitation, and Alice Wahome of Lands tied at 24%.
I am not in a position to say, TIFA is not in a position to say, when we have these national power blackouts, is that really in any way the fault or the mistake of Bwana Chirchir? There are a lot of people below him who are dealing with power. So I don't know where the blame lies. But, you know, the responsibility starts with the person the president appoints to sit on top of that ministry.
The CS rating attributes used to compute overall scores are 6. First is awareness, that is known by Kenyans. Secondly, trust that the CS will deliver on their mandate. Third, visibility, communicates what their ministry is doing. Fourth, commitment, that the CS is committed to addressing issues facing Kenyans. Fifth, issues resolution, that the CS is actively strengthening issues in the ministry. And lastly, transparent, that the CS is honest and open about issues facing the ministry. The 46-page report also disclosed that Interior CS Kithure Kindiki has toured 41 counties with zero number of foreign trips on social media pages, while Musalia Mudavadi has toured 23 counties and had 16 foreign trips. President William Ruto is doing well in protecting forests, supporting agriculture, combating pollution and contamination, as well as encouraging tourists and investment in tourism. Kenyans, however, rank him poorly in reducing the debt/donor financial dependence, reducing corruption, creating jobs, and reducing the cost of living. The release reports results from a CATI, that is mobile phone survey, conducted between 25th November and 7th December. It engaged 3,009 respondents who constitute a representative sample of Kenya's adult population, that is those above 17 years of age. George Maringa, TV47, Nairobi.
In other news, President William Ruto has maintained his stance to implement the housing levy despite a High Court judgment that declared it unconstitutional. The president noting that the implementation is necessary for Kenya to catch up with other nations. Sheila Chelangat reports.
While speaking at the second annual Kenya Diaspora Investment Conference, President William Ruto vowed to ensure the successful implementation of the housing project.
1,410 slums in Kenya. It's not just Kibera. You know, whenever we talk about slums, people think it is Mukuru and Kibera and a few places. 1,410 countrywide. So we need to liberate our people from the indignity of living in slums.
The president says that through the affordable housing project, Kenya will be able to catch up with developing nations.
It look like owning a house is the privilege of the people who have means. We must make it owning a house is a right for every citizen who lives in our country.
Further, he says that the implementation is the bone of contention, noting that the project was a good plan, with it having featured in the manifestos of both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza during the 2022 elections.
So this beautiful project was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza. The same housing project, complete with percentages of the levy, was also in the Azimio manifesto. But when it came to implementation, my friends, that is where the devil lives. Nobody wanted it implemented. Because we all want to talk about it. It is good. You know, we go tell the people, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, when hardly people mean it.
The High Court, however, stopped collection of the housing levy, terming the levy discriminatory on employed Kenyans while excluding those in the informal sector. Sheila Chelangat, for TV 47.
And those are our top stories this morning. Do stand by for a look at the newspapers after this break. All right. A quick look at the dailies this morning, and that TIFA poll features on most of the front pages today. And we start off with the Daily Nation. Poll says hustlers are the most dissatisfied. There's just one strand of the extensive polling that this TIFA poll brought us. And Kenya Kwanza supporters are the most disillusioned with the state of affairs in the country, according to a new opinion poll, with the majority citing the high cost of living, unemployment, and corruption. This even as President Ruto on Tuesday asked Kenyans to be patient, saying the country was on the right track. That story is on page 7, and it has a lot of figures on the front page. It also has the ranking of CSs on the front page. Kithure Kindiki at 65% approval rating, Musalia Mudavadi 62, Machogo of Education 58, Nahumicha of Health 57, as well as Kipchumba Murkomen of Transport at 57 as well. Interestingly, the CS for Energy, Davis Chirchir, has been ranked at 19%, a paltry 19%. That's a big story on the front page of the Daily Nation. Cost of living was a major part of the ruling party's successful 2022 campaign. Away from this, the other highlight on the front page of the Daily Nation has to do with matters climate and that climate change conference in Dubai. End of oil age, they ask. COP28 ends with deal on fossil fuel phase out. That story is featured on page 2. And matters health down there. Hospitals threaten to lock out teachers, police in 5 billion shilling row. Let's take a look at the top strip of the Daily Nation. Matter Sports Omanyala now targets 100 meters, 200 meters races at Paris Olympics. On page 5, Cabinet moves to end power outages. And Kenya probe in China's world supremacy agenda, says US report. Matters global diplomacy and politics bundled into one. That story is on page 10, and that's the Daily Nation today. If you take a look at the other big daily, that's the Standards. It steers clear of the polling by TIFA. Talks about the cabinet meeting held yesterday and the issues discussed. One of them was the incessant power outages. And on this, Ruto cracks the whip. Some of the measures include splitting transmission line systems so that power failure in one part does not affect the entire country. And to deal with overloading, build a 37.5 billion shilling Bomet-Narok line with African Development Bank funding. Now, the president read the Riot Act during a cabinet meeting. He termed frequent nationwide electricity outages embarrassing and unacceptable and directed power bosses to comprehensively deal with the failures that are hurting Kenyans and the country's investment profile. That's a big story on the front page of the Standard. The other big highlight, world strikes historic pact on ditching fossil fuel. And yes, today being Thursday, there's the real estate pullout inside the Standard. Other highlights on the top strip of the Standard this morning. Inside Raila's push to stem Azimio revolt. Elsewhere, MPs' sibling rivalry goes to court. On the international scene, Israel losing backing over Gaza war. And in sports, a lonely walk to reality matters Manchester United, with a photo there of their manager Erik ten Hag. That's a standard today. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo. Also back to the same theme about the TIFA poll, this strand about CS's ranking, mawaziri baridi, habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Mawaziri Kithure Kindiki na Kipchumba Murkomen wajitokeza kama wachapakazi wanaotangamana na raia. Waziri wa Kawi Davis Chirchir ameorodheshwa miongoni mwa mawaziri ambao utendakazi wao ni wa kutiliwa shaka zaidi katika baraza la mawaziri la Rais William Ruto, akifuatiwa kwa karibu na waziri wa jinsia Aisha Jumwa, kulingana na utafiti wa hivi punde wa shirika la TIFA. Habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele. Habari kamili iko kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa Taifa Leo. Vidokezo vingine pale chini kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Waamrisha waziri aondoe nchi gizani, masuala ya stima ama umeme. Kwingineko, bwana harusi kurudi soko baada ya miezi minne. Bwana Rono asema atachukua muda wake kabla ya kupenda tena, na mmezea mate lazima wasubiri. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Kwingineko, jeshi Uganda laondoka DR Congo. Wanajeshi waliondoka siku 5 baada ya wakuu wa jeshi hilo kuidhinisha hatua hiyo. Kuna vidokezo zaidi pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Benki ya DTB kufungua matawi 17. Na kwenye spoti, dai Man United imepoteza mwelekeo. Mashabiki wataka kocha Erik ten Hag aondoke kwa kutopanga kikosi vizuri. Habari hiyo kwenye ukurasa wa 20 wa Taifa Leo. Tuangazie masuala ya biashara sasa. On Business Daily, the big story on the Business Daily this morning, Kenya pawn in China's supremacy agenda. Now this is according to a US report. Kenya top recipient of BRI investment in Africa. This is a big story on the Business Daily. US report faults Kenya for extraditing 45 Taiwan citizens. And yes, the US-China war making it to Kenya's shores. The other big headline on the front page of the Business Daily, Kenya's cut vehicle imports by 22 billion shillings on taxes. Kenyans have slashed expenditure on the importation of motor vehicles. And I cannot tell anything else clearly there, but yes, they've dropped by approximately 22 billion Kenya shillings, and this is being blamed on higher taxes. On the ticker, other highlights on the ticker, front page of the Business Daily, irony of a weak Kenya shilling and declining export earnings. Elsewhere, this is interesting, KQ cancels flights on crew shortages. National carrier Kenya Airways faces the cabin crew shortage that has forced it to cancel and delay flights, threatening its revenues over the peak festive season. And finally, NSE books more losses despite gains from large firms. And that's the front page of the Business Daily. Still in Kenya, we have more dailies, and let's start off with the People Daily. On the People Daily, it still matters to do with that TIFA survey yesterday, damning survey. Kenya heading in the wrong direction. This is the latest poll by TIFA showing that vast majority of Kenyans are worse off now economically than they were a year ago. The story has been covered on pages 4 and 5 of the People Daily. It is the biggest talking point this morning. The only other story on the front page of the People Daily, just what are Kenyans searching for online? Yes, top Google searches. I just remember that the top individual searched most by Kenyans is a former Nairobi woman representative. No, was she ever? Millie Omanga, at least a candidate for that position. On the very top strip of the People Daily, where rite of passage threatens lives, medical experts raise red flag over traditional circumcision practices after 10 initiates die of pneumonia in parts of Rift Valley. And a photo there of young initiates heading to undergo this ritual. And that is a People Daily today. The other local headline, The Star, still matters to do with the TIFA poll. Mudavadi Kindiki rated top in Ruto cabinet. Worst performers include Chirchir, Jumwa, Ndongo, Njero, and Wahome. Popularity, Musalia Ababu have traveled 16 and 13 times abroad. Meanwhile, Kithure Kindiki, despite traveling to 41 counties in total, has not made a single trip outside this country since his appointment. Other highlights on the front page of The Star: PSC and Muturi office embroiled in jobs tough war. Elsewhere, couple detained after reporting daughter's death. And on the top strip, uproar over state awards as overlooked leaders cry foul. And there an image of Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna, who complained bitterly on Twitter. He said he had been nominated as a member of Senate, but he did not get that accolade. And those are the big stories making headlines locally in Kenya. Time now to take a look at what our neighbors are talking about. We start off with Uganda. In Kampala this morning on the Daily Monitor, the big headline: roadworks drag city to its knees. This, they call it Kampala's nightmare. Even when the works are welcome to fix the messy road network, the public has faulted authorities for the poorly planned closures and diversions, which have trapped them in long jams and eaten into working hours. This story has been given quite some coverage on the Daily Monitor, pages 4 and 5. Big news in Kampala, and they're complaining the roads are just a mess. And then a very imposing image of Uganda's military and artillery returning home. UPDF troops return home from DR Congo, end of tour of duty. Uganda's People's Defense Forces returning home from that peacekeeping mission. The other highlight on the front page of the Daily Monitor: in Uganda, serial killer jailed for over 120 years. Other highlights there on the very bottom of the page: Aleppo praises China for cordial ties with Uganda, and Pastor Semper joins government defense of anti-gay law. These are the top stories in Uganda today as captured by the Daily Monitor. One more highlight on the front page up there on the top strip: Bobby bribery claim rattles Parliament. Let's cross over to Tanzania. And in Tanzania, we start off with The Citizen. The big story today, as captured by The Citizen: help revive scholarly debates. UDSM academics challenged. Academics and development stakeholders yesterday urged the University of Dar es Salaam Academic Staff Assembly to spearhead the revival of scholarly debates that have been credited with previously driving reform and development. So matters academic discourse making it to the front page of The Citizen. Other highlights: yes, a mention of the COP28 summit. COP28 strikes deal on transition away from fossil fuels, and this one mirrors exactly what's on the front pages of The Standard and the Daily Nation in Kenya as well. Back to other highlights: what launch of oxygen therapy machine means. Muhimbili National Hospital yesterday unveiled the first hyperbaric chamber in East Africa, and only the second in sub-Saharan Africa. Tanzania making strides in matters medical technology. Elsewhere, bus falls into river, killing 2 people, and the image has been shared there on the front page of The Citizen. And on the very bottom strip, DR Congo's new natural resources pledge. And all right, those are the big stories as recorded there on The Citizen in Tanzania. Tuangazie jarida la Mwananchi, tukisalia kule Bongo. Habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi: hukumu ya kunyongwa. Mahakama ya amuru watu 6 wanyongwe hadi kufa kwa kulipua kanisa, kuua watatu. Jaji Nkwabi achambua tukio, aachia watatu. Ndugu aeleza hatua zaidi za kuchukua. Habari zingine: wenye magonjwa sugu kisukari kupata ahueni wanaita kule. Hospitali ya Taifa Muhimbili imefunga mtambo wa kisasa wa hewa tiba wenye uwezo wa kutibu zaidi ya magonjwa 10 kwa mpigo, wakati huo mgonjwa akiendelea na mambo mengine. Tukiangazia pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, vidokezo zaidi: uwajibikaji, siku 18 ngumu kwa wakuu wa wilaya, wakurugenzi nchini. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 22. Kwingineko, mvua yapaisha bei ya sukari Kilimanjaro. Habari zaidi: matumaini treni ya SGR safari za Dar Morogoro. Kwingineko, laini za simu zilivyowaponza watuhumiwa. Na habari ya ajali hile, wawili wafa ajalini, 37 wajeruhiwa. Ni ajali ya basi lililobingirika na kutumbukia kwenye mto kule Tanzania. Na hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Na hapo ndio tunahitimisha masuala ya magazeti hapa nchini na Uganda na Tanzania pia. A quick reminder, later on today we'll be enjoying some holiday tunes courtesy of DJ Westy. Do stand by for that. We'll also be having the All Stars Dance Academy right here in studio. You do not want to miss this, even as we get closer to the holidays. Meanwhile, very interesting discussions on the dailies, and this morning we're privileged to be having in studio Geoffrey Ruku, MP Mbeere North, Didmus Barasa, MP Kimilili, and Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, as we take a look at the state of the nation. Do stand by for that after the break. And remember, you can be part of this conversation online on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. All right, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indemuli. We now want to take a look at the state of the nation. Very interesting headlines coming our way this morning from the dailies. It is raining in Nairobi, and we do not even have the physical paper on set. But we do have the e-paper, and we'll try and work with that. This morning, we're privileged to have in studio MPs, Geoffrey Ruku, Mbeere North, and Didmas Barasa Kimilili. Good morning, gentlemen. Karibuni sana. We're hoping that Sube Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, will join us. But the big story this morning has to do with the TIFA poll. And it has various strands. It has a CS's ranking. And the other issue has been hustlers feeling most dissatisfied and how they rank President Ruto's performance or lack of, and we'll be looking at those because on the Daily Nation, hustlers are most dissatisfied, and that is the biggest headline. On the Taifa Leo, mawaziri baridi, that's habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele. Kwingineko, on the Star, Mudavadi Kindiki rated top in Ruto cabinet, and on the People Daily, damning survey, Kenya heading in wrong direction. And let's start with the CSS survey, because a lot has been said, and we live in the information age where any failure or any misstep by any of these members of cabinet is so visible. Case in point, the recurrent or repeated nationwide power outages. And incidentally, the Energy CS has been rated as the least performing by Kenyans in this poll. And I know many questions have been asked, and I've had an opportunity to hear your sentiments about these polls, and you do not rate them quite highly. But you must say that this time round, Didmas, it is accurate that Kenyans can actually see who is doing what where, in as far as the CSs are concerned.
Yes, I want to agree with you, and just to expound further is that Kenyans, they do not have a criteria to really look at what the CSs are doing in terms of this is the actual score. This is what they're supposed to do. But I think they are what is coming out clearly that is the approval rating in terms of visibility. And you will agree with me that 95% of Kenyans know Musalia Mudavadi, name recognition, because he's a household name. He has been around for quite some time. Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki also was on the limelight. You remember he almost became our running mate, our Kenya Kwanza running mate, and he has been very visible on TV everywhere, combating bandits across the country. So Kenyans will really recognize Abraham Kithure Kindiki very well. But I'm also not shocked that if you ask the Kenyans who is the Minister for Lands, they don't know. They may not know Zakaria Njeru. They don't know, you know, because these are people who are quiet. You don't see them on TV, on commenting on topical issues that will affect Kenyans. And I dare even say that when you are a cabinet secretary, you need to blow out those issues which Kenyans will feel, you know, which Kenyans will feel that you are doing something that will improve their lives. Mm-hmm. And I think, to me, if you ask me, the CS land has got every opportunity to shine, because land problems, you cannot make, there are very many land problems in this country.
She has, curiously, Alice Wahome, CS Lands, has been rated among the least performing.
Yeah, but yeah, you know, she's just taken over that ministry from Zakaria Njeru. I even didn't know that Alice Wahome is now the CS Lands. I didn't forgotten. I thought it's Zakaria Njeru, you know, because it's very clear that ministers who are quiet, who are not visible, they are ranking very low.
But is that really accurate? Because it would appear that Kenyans are equating the performance of the cabinet secretaries with what they are feeling directly. For example, when it comes to the economy, they've rated Professor Njuguna Ndung'u poorly. He's among the least the ones with the least approval. Meanwhile, in matters security, Kithure Kindiki is top. On matters energy, where we've had issues about high fuel prices, incessant nationwide outages, hence Chirchir is being rated poorly. Is it simply because they do not appear on TV?
Yeah, that's, to me that's one of the factors. There are quite a number of factors because that kind of rating is a measure of a number of issues or variables. The other variable is that the nature of the office of Churchill Energy requires a lot of planning, a lot of indoor boardroom planning, and also requires a lot of resources when it comes to the issues to do with the rectification process in our villages. I know at the moment the CS is just finalizing a plan of putting across a number of counties, not all counties, but a number of counties in the Republic, rectification process. That is the last mile connectivity in partnership with the Government of Kenya and World Bank. So when this is launched, you'll see Minister or CS Churchill more visible in different parts of this country.
Do you think the rating he's been given right now is unfair to his performance? That you feel probably he would have, he has performed better than how Kenyans feel he has?
Why I would think it's a bit unfair is because this institution, TIFA, is the same institution which has been telling us from 2013 that Raila Odinga is the leading candidate when it comes to presidential polls, with a margin of almost 5%, 6% around there, sometimes even 10%. But from 2013, we have seen a totally different reality. So we don't know where do they get this rating from. I don't want to cast aspersions to that greater extent, but we also are saying there is always margin of error in any statistical analysis. And in most cases, the margin of error is minus or plus 5%. So in this case, from where I stand, I know Churchill as one of the serious guys and very bright guys we have in William Ruto's cabinet.
Yet they're serious.
I want to completely disagree with my friend. Mm-hmm. If there is a minister who should be sacked immediately, is Davis Churchill. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, he has failed to inspire confidence and hope in Kenyans. If you are in charge of the ministry and you are telling Kenyans that even fuel prices can go to 300 bob, we are not sorting it out, it's very difficult, then you have a problem. If you are the minister in charge of electricity, then you are telling Kenyans that Kenyans must be prepared for power rationing. You are just becoming stupid. Mm-hmm. It is the responsibility of the minister to inspire confidence. To me, there are two ministers who should be sacked immediately. Mm-hmm. David Chirchir and the Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. Because when Njuguna Ndung'u...
Kenyans the truth?
When Njuguna Ndung'u, let me tell you, Indimuli, when you are the CS in charge of Treasury and you are telling the Kenyans that the Kenya as a country is broke, then you want to collapse the whole industry. What is going to happen? That the investors are going to flee this country. The stock market is going to crumple almost to a halt. So that is being, for lack of a better word, that is being stupid. Mm-hmm. For lack of a better word. A minister, a government, when you are a minister of government, you have a responsibility to inspire confidence among the Kenyan people. Even when the country is at war, you have to appear like you are managing because you are paid to manage that makes you think the country is going the wrong direction.
How far should that go? Should it include hoodwinking Kenyans and not telling Kenyans the truth? Because if at all the situation is dire, Kenyans need to know that it is that bad.
No. You know, like for example, if you tell people that we must be prepared for power rationing, then you are simply telling Kenyans that maybe the previous regime, when they left the offices, they also went with water. They went with the best engineers in this country. We've not had power rationing for a longest period of time. Power rationing only happens when our rivers are running dry. when there is no water to run the turbines and generate more electricity. But when we are having floods that are even destroying our roads, we are having rivers overflowing, then you appear on TV telling Kenyans that we should be prepared for power rationing. I mean, are you out of your senses?
Yet Kenyans demand that at least we should be told the truth. If at all the economy is in dire straits, we should know that, yes, in the next few months, we should expect a problem. Isn't that a fair expectation?
We want to encourage the President of the Republic. The President is doing the right thing, but there are some members of his team who are letting him down. I have in my list 3 people who are letting down the President. One is Professor Dungu, who is the CS Treasury. The other one is the advisor, economic advisor, David D. And the other one is the director, we call him the central bank governor, Duge. Why do I say this? These 3 gentlemen truly are qualified economists. They are guys who have worked with IMF, I don't know, they have many years of experience in terms of their qualification. But their demeanor to all these positions is one thing. Market respond to sentiments. For anybody who has been in school of business, for anybody who has studied economics, we understand that markets respond to sentiment. And when you're in a position of authority and you wake up and say that this economy is completely broke, this economy is I don't know what, and we have a barometer of financial markets by name Nairobi Stock Exchange, where we have many institutions across the globe who have invested their resources in this market. What do you expect them to do the following day when they hear such a statement from the office with authority when it comes to matters financial market, when it comes to matters banking, when it comes to matters economy? The following day, there will be serious capital flight from Nairobi Stock Exchange to other markets in the world. Because we are not only the best financial market, we have other financial markets across the world where people can invest their resources, even virtual assets.
Are we saying that the government or the leadership is allowed to mislead the country out of necessity? Because of business sentiment, because even the president came out.
We are not talking about misleading the public. These 3 people I've mentioned, they have the capacity. Even as members of parliament, we don't have even that platform. But we go beyond our ways to get this information. They have information at their desk, at their when they need. To know the inflows, the capital inflows, the resources we are getting as a nation every single day. There is a platform which they can be able to get this information. Now, they also can be able to know how much domestic debt do we have, because we get our domestic debt through treasury bonds and treasury bills. Okay? So there's a platform for that. They also capacity to know when is the maturity and what is the interest rates. So from the capital inflows, the resources we are getting, vis-a-vis the maturity, they can be able to estimate properly that by February we have, for instance, by February we have internal debt, domestic debt, which maturing in February, 401 billion Kenyan shilling.
Yes.
Is the government ready to pay that by February?
Isn't that the reason why the CS Treasury came out and said that we are in a crisis, that the way things are looking, we are already struggling with salaries? Because yes, it would appear that after the president said we are already out of debt distress, and it's back to the same argument. Are we just doing that to give Kenyans hope?
We did not give Professor Dungu the job to be just telling us that we are in a crisis. We gave Professor Dungu a job so that he can find innovative solutions. Let him tell us what he's doing in solving some of these problems. And if he cannot be able to do that, to tell us what he's doing, he has no business of getting that salary from Kenyans.
Our concern now is, are we being told the truth?
You know, I have...
Because even the CS for Treasury has been forced to rescind what he had said and said now that he was misquoted.
You know, I have the advantage of sitting with the president and having a chit-chat on a number of issues that affect our country. I can tell you for a fact that our current economic turmoil is temporal because of the Eurobond that is maturing early next year. You know, for example, in a very simple terms that Kenyans can understand, if you, Mr. Indimuli, you have a debt which you are told you have to pay in the next 3 months, what you are going to do is that you try to negotiate with the people that you owe to see whether you can restructure the debt. And even if you go and get to Ruku and Ruku agrees to borrow you funds at a lower interest so that you can pay, you will want to go slow on the amount of money that you have in your pocket. You will reduce your expenditure even in the house. If you used to take your wife to a very expensive salon, you will begin maybe to take her to a kinyozi because you are not sure whether what Ruku has told you that he will lend you some money and what the people that you owe have said that they will renegotiate that debt so that the burden is lessened. You don't know whether they will do it or not. So that is exactly what is happening in this country. It is not that this country, Kenya, is broke. We have too much money, we have enough money, but we are only waiting to see whether our development partners who have agreed to give us money by January, by February, so that we can use that money to repay the very expensive Eurobond. We wait to see whether that one happens or not. We are also waiting to see whether our agreement with the people whom we owe money, of course, they have agreed to renegotiate and restructure our debts. We want to see whether they will do it or not. So if they will do it by the month of January, February, then well and good. We will go back and begin to spend the money which we have. If they don't, the money that we have so far saved, it's enough to pay that debt, and then we just live within our means and proceed forward. It is not a crisis that can be to a level where you want to make a statement that will make the people who have shares on the Nairobi Stock Exchange to offload their shares and leave. It's basically just saying, let us slow down on some capital expenditure, let us slow down on the new projects which consumes too much of our funds so that we can react. It's just a matter of closing an outlet to increase the volume of water in a dam.
If we do have that option, if that option has existed, then why did we opt to look for financial partners, the IMF and the World Bank, for debt relief, if at all we had the option of using locally generated revenue to do the same?
You know, our locally generated revenue was not enough. That's why if you look at what government is operating now, you've seen, there were more recommendations in the Finance Act to increase our local revenue. You've seen various state departments trying to increase even the number of money that Kenyans pay for services, so that at least we can increase the locally generated revenue. Nonetheless, all these things, what we need to do as a country is that we need to own up that a mistake was happened. The previous regime overborrowed. They borrowed too much money. Kenya as a country lived beyond her means. We lived beyond our means. We have got too much debt obligations. But it's a scenario where you... But
you don't want the CS Treasury to tell us that.
No. You know, when you are at the CS Treasury, your responsibility, Kenyans pay you salary to ensure that the problems which will make our economy collapse or not to grow are sorted out. Okay. So what CS Treasury needs to do, he needs to come out. For example, if you are a doctor and a patient is brought to you who is in a coma, your role as a doctor is to get your gear, get into the theater, get into the surgical room, get your equipment, and tell the relatives of that patient that the patient is in the right hands. You know, you are properly qualified doctor, properly educated. Our economy that was in ICU, it required an economic surgeon to get our economy out of ICU, Kenyans need not to worry. William Ruto is in the surgical room. He is better. He understands our economy better. He's not saying, give me 2 years. Okay. He's not saying, give me 5 years. He's saying, give me some little time so that we can get our economy back on track.
And we'll be looking at President William Ruto's performance after the break, because it is also contained in that TIFA poll, and how high he scores in some areas and where he scores the least. You're watching Morning Cafe. We're taking a look at State of the Nation today, matters to do with that TIFA poll that has so many strands, including the ranking of CSs as well as Kenya's economic performance. Do stand by for that. You're watching Morning Cafe. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. I'm still in studio with MPs Geoffrey Ruku, Mbeere North, and Didmas Barasa Kimilili. And we still continue looking at the dailies and also the poll by TIFA released yesterday. And now I want us to move to President Ruto's government performance according to this poll. And on a 3-point scale, 1 being very bad and 3 being very good, President William Ruto scores highly in protecting forests, supporting agriculture, combating pollution and contamination, and finally encouraging tourists and investment in tourism. Meanwhile, he is performing dismally in reducing the debt and in donor financial dependence, and reducing corruption, creating jobs, and reducing the cost of living. It's the same conversation we were having, Bwana Ruku, that let's start off with the issue of debts. That there's this narrative about if you're already in a hole, you should stop digging.
Yes.
But even as we agree, the president is already in discussions with the IMF and the World Bank and other lenders to try and help us or give us some form of relief to try and alleviate the current debt crisis we're in. So in that, Kenya is seeing we're still dependent on financial donors. Yet the promise was that that would change. So do you agree with this rating, that at least in that issue, the president may be justified, but in Kenyans' eyes, he's not reducing debt and he is still leaving us with in a financial situation where we're dependent on donors?
It is good to mention that there is no country in the world which doesn't have debt. The largest economy in the world, United States of America, has huge trillions of dollars in debt from China and other nations. China, the same, has huge debt. Japan, I think, is one of the largest economy with very huge debts, and also which behaves in a very funny way that you give you ask for a debt which does not generate any interest. Actually, it is a negative interest. I don't know how that works, but what I mean is, what I'm saying is that every economy has debt. We passed in Parliament what we are calling debt anger, and we said that the debt of the Republic of Kenya will never be above 65% of the GDP and will never be below 45% of the GDP. That tells you that debt is one of the critical, very key variable factor into growing the economy. When it is very huge, beyond what the economy can be able to surface, then it becomes disastrous.
I repeat that already.
Okay, it becomes disastrous. Now, we are where we are because of the decisions which have been made by the past regimes. And if you look at the amount of debt which President Kibaki left, it was about 1 trillion. When Uhuru Kenyatta came into power, up to the time Ruto is taking over, we were at about 8.7 trillion trillion shilling in terms of debt as a nation. This is quite huge. And when President Ruto was coming in, there was nothing. So there were two options: either to get some more debt so that he can be able to run the government, become more innovative in terms of raising revenue, and that's why some taxes were increased, and also see the partners, cooperation you can develop as a president and other nations who you can get grants to do a number of things as a country. So where we are, for the last 1 year, it is true, IMF and World Bank have come in to give some debt to the nation. But also you must appreciate that World Bank and IMF cannot come and give loan to an economy which is completely under. By Kenya able to secure some more debts or financing from World Bank, it means there is the economy is still not that bad. So it is true, the government of William Samoei Ruto has secured some debt to ease some of these problems. But also, the president is trying as much as he can to come up with innovative ways of raising more revenue locally, okay? And also to try and see whether, because Kenya has resources, has minerals. I think the government also has to know what they can do. The Minister of Mining has to move with speed to ensure some of the mineral resources we have as a nation, how they can be harnessed so that we can get some of these resources to help the economy. So it is true, we are in a problem as far as debt servicing is concerned. We are paying huge amount of money next year for the Eurobond, a Eurobond which we don't know what that money did, which project were financed by Eurobond. We clearly don't know.
In 2014, when 1 year into the administration of William Ruto.
That is true. That is true.
The president must know at least how that Eurobond was spent. The very first Eurobond that is now due.
Remember, Edumuri, when you are president of the nation, you are in charge. And your deputy may not have a lot of say. Presidents are very powerful across the world. And the president of Kenya is a very powerful institution. President is a very powerful institution. And the president is very powerful.
I have something that I wanted to put it in the public domain, because we have some misconception around that every countries have debts. Our economy is where it is now because of too much overborrowing that we cannot service, putting the country on a lane that makes the Kenya live beyond her means. Overborrowing is not a good thing to do. But because we are in a hole, we are willing to support the president and his government to get us out of the hole. But for future, I will advise against borrowing. You know, my friend here has said that even the biggest economies in the world have debts. He mentioned Japan and the US, and I agree, Japan and the US have got too much debts. But you look at their capability to repay. Their capability to repay cannot be compared with Kenya. For your information, for American and even Japan to breach their budget deficit, they can print money. The economy allows their country to print money and pump it and breach the economy and the budget deficit. In Africa, especially in Kenya, you go that route, then our Kenyan shillings will go down the value even below the Zimbabwean currency. Then you will be able to, we will be in a very bad situation. So these issues of comparing Kenya's debts with the other countries, I think is wrong. It all depends on the healthiness of the economy. You can't compare the economy of Kenya and the economy of Japan. Mm-hmm. Japan has got so much money that is locally generated, and the economy is very stable. America, of course, for very obvious reasons, is a superior economy. Kenya, as a country, our economy is developing. It's not developed yet. So we should avoid these debts at all costs in future. Okay. And the problem that our country is faced is that all African countries who have become sympathetic of IMF and World Bank in terms of incorporating the IMF and World Bank conditions in our financial management systems, such countries don't manage at all. Because World Bank, all they want is money.
But what solutions do we have? Because now, okay, fine, we understand we are here. It may be someone else's doing. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. We are here already. The fact that we appear dependent on more debt to survive, at least in the interim, is an issue. The countries that you mentioned, Japan and the United States, they have huge capacity to produce, hence to export. We find ourselves in a situation where we are net importers of food. We are importing food as it is. And that has really affected the exchange rate. And by the exchange rate being affected that much, it exacerbates our debt situation, because an amount that you have to pay 400 billion, you end up paying like 600, 700 billion shillings because of the difference in exchange rate. What interventions do we have to ensure that production in this country, at least, because we're either producing goods or services, what is this that we're producing that we can say, hopefully in the short term or in the next 1 year, we'll be producing enough to sustain our debt repayments?
I agree with my brother here. That is true. We cannot compare Kenyan economy and other developed economies. But we have a number of revenue streams, or we have a number of areas where you can focus on to ensure this problem of debt is completely alleviated from our economy in the coming years. As I've said, we have resources. We have natural resources which we can utilize. Kenyan government need to focus seriously on some of these natural resources, how they can be exploited for the benefit of the economy. Exploitation of those resources and variation of those resources, and they get exported to wherever they are needed, so that we can get revenues from the natural resources we have. Number two, any nation which has developed in the world, the major economies, there's not even a single nation, or if they are there, I know there are a few of them, without getting military into the economic plan, into the economic growth plan. We spent huge amount of resources for our military, for our security, external security. In the United States of America, it is what it is because of its military today. Mm-hmm. China, the same, is more or less a military nation. We must rethink our military strategy as a nation.
We have a military man here.
For the economic growth. I'm a student of international relations. Mm-hmm. I spent 2 years at the EDIS, Institute of Diplomacy and International Relations in Gresham Road. This is, I know it's a very, it's a double-sided sword, issue. But we need to look at how we can put military at our economic growth plan. We send our military in Congo. We spend our resources. We spend our military in Somalia. We have spent our resources as a nation. In Sudan, what are we getting out of this as an economy? It is true, without peace within the region, the Kenyan economy will be affected. But we need to go beyond that for the economic growth.
So that isn't as far as cutting our expenditure is concerned, or are you talking
as
about
far as growth,
the military?
As far as the growth of this economy is concerned, and the student international relations can advise on how that can be done and can be implemented. And I think a time will be coming when we have a president who will be very bold enough to say we are going to take this direction. It is a risky decision, but for the sake of growth of this economy, something in future will need to be done in that direction.
And it's curious, I want to hear what you have to say about that, but allow me to introduce another panelist, Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, and sorry for lateness. I don't know what happens when it rains in the city, the traffic. Yes. If you leave later than 5, you end up getting caught up in traffic, but nevertheless here I am.
It's good you're here, and we'll continue discussing, because we're looking at the president's performance as captured by the TIFA poll. But we had got into a very interesting discussion with the suggestion that probably we should relook at how we spend our money. And that issue of looking at our disciplined forces, it's a very dicey discussion that Bwana Ruko has introduced.
I have a different view. Sorting out the problems which we are in now is as simple as 1 + 1. What the government needs to do, one, is to be true to our constitution and our laws. We have got 2 levels of government. We are focusing too much on national government. We also have other 47 county governments. So what we need to do is that we need to follow the law. If you look at the county government's expenditures, you see when the recurrent expenditure is more than development expenditure. In fact, we have some counties out of, for example, in Bungoma, out of 14 billion that the county government gets from the national government, the only money available for development is about 3 billion, which is completely wrong. We must ensure that the county governments, they do not overcommit more than 60%. More than 60, we must ensure that the county government commits at least a minimum of 60% of the total revenue they receive to development, not on recurrent issues. Once that one is sorted out, then we'll have development in every country that we are talking about here. The second thing is that we must live to the fact that Kenya is, the Kenyan economy is a developing one, it's not yet developed. And we focus on the very basic things before. We must ensure that the Kenyans have water, Kenyans have access to good education, Kenyans have access to good health care. Once those things are done, then we can begin to talk about things to do with the expressway, things to do with these major capital projects, things which cannot, you know, it pains me that you go into an area, a county, you have, for example, a 4 billion project in a particular place, and 90% of the population don't have access to clean water. 50% of the population don't have access to.
Do you think that the government should slow down on some of these capital projects, especially an example like the housing project, which is a big and cost-consuming, resource-heavy project, that in our situation right now, probably we should slow down on some of this?
The only advantage of affordable housing that is going to it creates job to thousands of, to millions of young people in our country. But the day that I will be happy is when African countries will stop competing with Western countries, with Europe, will stop competing with New York City, stop competing with London in terms of infrastructure. We must live within our means.
Okay, let's bring Suba Churchill into this conversation. We're looking at the TIFA poll and specifically on President William Ruto's government's performance. On a scale, on a 3-point scale, 1 being very bad and 3 being very good, he's been rated on a number of issues where he has performed exemplarily well. And where his scores highly is on protecting forests at 2.3 out of 3, supporting agriculture, combating pollution and contamination, encouraging tourists and investments in tourism. That is on one side. And probably that's where the opportunities lie. I don't know. You will tell us. On the other hand, he has been scored poorly in as far as reducing the debt and donor financial dependence, on reducing corruption, on creating jobs, and reducing the cost of living. It is a balance, and this is very clear. Should he focus more on matters production, probably agriculture and tourism, where he scores highly already, and probably that would help us with these other issues?
Exactly. You know, I watched His Excellency speak yesterday, and I saw a gentleman dead set on where he has fixed his mind. Comparing, of course, Kenya, as he has always done, with Singapore, Malaysia, and other Asian tigers. My concern with this comparison is that those countries did not develop immediately after experiencing the kind of drought that encumbered this country, and that devastated our economic development and production. There are farmers, livestock farmers in northern Kenya that completely lost their stock. And so the president's speech and determination seem not to take that into account. Singapore, Malaysia, and those other Asian tigers did not develop or achieve affordable housing immediately after the kind of pandemic that we have had across the world, the COVID-19. And so when I looked at the president, I was tempted to liken him to a man who means well and who takes his family to a showroom to buy a car. Between them, they can only raise money enough to buy a tuk-tuk. But then he meets somebody who is driving a V8 and says, we must leave this showroom with a V8 and you must produce it. So he puts pressure on a family whose income he knows very well cannot afford a V8. And he's stuck there in the showroom. And so I don't want to imagine that at some point the owners of the showroom will mobilize security to get him and his family out. But he seems to mean well, but completely ignores the context, the socio-economic context in which we are. And that's why, I think, the TIFA polling kind of reflects the kind of, dilemma in which he finds himself in. But as far as he's concerned, and I saw the determination on his face, he doesn't seem to see the dilemma. He's headed straight. Now, when you talk about affordable housing, we must of all ask ourselves, affordable to who? We know very many housing estates, even in this city, that have been started with the intention of accommodating those who currently live in the unplanned settlements, the slums. Komarok Estates, for example, was built deliberately. In fact, some of the houses, I lived there for almost 11 years. Some of the housing units in Komarok had even chimneys. The idea was that the people who would occupy them are people who may not afford even gas, cooking gas, and would be tempted to resort to, fuel, literally, firewood. And that's why, some of those smaller housing units, the 1-bedrooms, and even some of the 2-bedrooms, had chimneys purposely to enable those who would live there. But who took up, who bought houses in Komarok? The middle class, and most of them, middle class. Those who used to work with Kenyari, Post Bank, and who could afford mortgage. Now, if the president and his team continues to talk about affordable housing, we must begin to interrogate that notion that it will be, those houses, once built, will be accessible to everyone, and including the mamambogas, that the Kenya Kwanza government wants to believe are the people being targeted for this project. And we have, the more recent case in Mombasa. A whole estate has been put up, and almost 70% of those who used to live there have been displaced. They can't just afford it. despite even the agreement, some memorandum of understanding that was agreed. But when now the units were ready for occupation, the people realized that they can't just afford it. And so these are the realities that we must talk about. Okay. And tell His Excellency that whereas you may mean well, just like Adolf Hitler intended, that every German household must have a car, the origin of the Volkswagen Beetle, as we know it today, was a directive by the Adolf Hitler to the people who were assembling motor vehicles, that his desire was to see every family in Germany, drive a car. Okay. And it happened. In this particular case, several years later, almost a decade, I'm afraid that the president's, ambition to have, eliminate, slums and so on, may not be achieved because it is anchored on assumptions. It is anchored on, wishing you were like another without taking into account the socio-economic circumstances.
There seems to be some truth to that, the situation we are in right now is so dire that it requires a stepping back from some of the ambitions that we hold. As Churchill says, the president may have very good intentions in some of these projects, but the crisis we are in may require that we hold back on some of this until we recover. Pushing through with some of this could lead us into more trouble, don't you think?
The truth, and these are the facts, that we have a crisis of housing in the Republic of Kenya. We have about 5 million Kenyans who don't have proper shelter. We are living in very deplorable situations. And these are Kenyans who have rights just like any other Kenyans. And they are Kenyans who are voters. They woke up very early in the morning to go and vote. And as the President of the Republic, he has an obligation and duty to know how he can solve this problem of shelter for these 5 million Kenyans. Now, when you are at the end of state and you are faced with such kind of a situation, and you are the President of the entire Republic, you need to come up with solutions, and in that matter, innovative solutions on how you can solve that housing crisis. And not only providing shelter, but also seeing how that program can inject some life, can stimulate the economy. So it is two-faced. One, providing shelter, and number two, stimulating the economy by providing jobs to young people who have been trained in our TFET, who have been trained in our polytechnics, providing jobs through manufacturing companies which are manufacturing iron sheets, which are manufacturing doors and windows, which are manufacturing tiles in the Republic of Kenya, all these housing construction materials. So, and by so doing, it means therefore we cannot say that President is taking a wrong direction in terms of solving the housing crisis. And probably we may not liken that with the German ITRA Bitro project, okay? Because one, ITRA propagated a serious war, it created a crisis in the world. It killed 6-7 million Jews.
I got it. He was not comparing William Ruto to Adolf Hitler. It is just the plan or the intention that was there and how it worked for that society.
Anything ITRA, whether it is Bitro, whether it is whatever he came up with.
My question is, will the president have focused more on production?
When you are a scientist, President William Ruto is not a scientist, he's not a criminal, but ITRA, he was a criminal, he was a warmonger, and such kind of individuals who like to come up with a program which look a bit, nice to pull the crown together, so that he can implement whatever he wants to implement. Okay. Whatever William Ruto is coming up with is genuine, is coming from his heart.
And it would appear even some of the things that he has been scored highly on are on the right trajectory. Issues like agriculture, tourism and investment in tourism, that these are possible routes for improvement and investment if at all Kenya was to focus more on producing more in terms of agriculture. Because it's either we're producing a service or we're producing goods.
Just before you come to my brother here, you know, President William Ruto said one thing, that he knows more than some of his ministers and PSs. And he said he's going to crack the whip. That is where we're having a problem.
He's yet to crack the whip.
This is a president who has never rested from the time he was sworn in, who has never gone for even 2 days off to go and rest. Because we have a problem as far as some of his staff are concerned. Because when you're talking about housing project, you saw what happened when PS Inga was trying to expound this program to Kenyans, that the president can be able to explain the program better than his technocrat. So we have a problem there. Okay. And that's why probably Kenyans will not be able to understand where and appreciate the effort the president is trying to make.
But my question now is, because we are in a situation where we have a huge debt crisis, yet we appear to be keen on spending more on mega projects, as opposed to boosting production that could add us better. Wouldn't it have been better if at all the president would have focused more on encouraging or boosting our productivity in terms of agriculture, exports, or services that we offer to the outside world, and in itself ensure food security within our borders, as opposed to spending more money? Because even the housing project, there are those who argue it is import intensive. Steel, which is a key component of housing, we import it. We do not have it locally. Isn't it a misdirection?
Absolutely not. You know, when you have a chef who is in the kitchen, all you need to know and to be told that you want to have this particular food on the table. The ingredients, how to cook it, whether it's cooked for 5 or 3 minutes, it's not, anybody outside the kitchen, you may really don't understand, because you're not part of the people who are preparing the menu to cook the food. And I have listened very keenly to what my friend Suba Churchill has said. No, Suba Churchill is a very intelligent person. We worked together, you know, in between 2001 to 2003 during that divisive referendum, when Kenya was first attempting to enact a new constitution. At that time, I was at the university. Him, Orioro Gomanduli, you know, Milio Odhiambo, Cecily Mbarire, they were getting us from the university to go on the road to demonstrate that this is what we want in this constitution. When you will appear on TV saying Kenyans have refused, this is what they want. Of course, what was happening that we would march from a place to a place. When we get to Uhuru Park, we get a bread and soda, then you go back to the university. So with that history, I may be tempted to relook at his handwriting, whether he's the one, whatever he has said, he means well from his heart, or he's serving the interest from somewhere that he was serving at that time when we were in the university. You know, the civil society, they are very good for the country if they direct all their energies into assisting Kenyans. But if you don't tread careful with the civil society, you can find our country even drifting to the LGBTQ way, because these are fellas who are puppets of certain people from elsewhere. So in terms of listening to who will give a true position on how affordable housing will benefit this country, I think Suba Churchill is the wrong person to articulate those kind of issues. Because like I've said here, affordable housing is going to create jobs for millions of young men across the country. So when that money gets into the pockets of these young people, they are going to use it to do other stuffs, right? So it's something that is a good thing. All we need to do as citizens of this country is to support the government of the day, as we are doing today. Let the government come out with a plan to get our economy out of the hole. And if we have any contrary opinion, or if we have something to contribute to the improvement of government policies the way Suba Churchill has said here, then we have an opportunity that every time when we are going for public participation, we should come forward and give these views so that they are incorporated at that time when the government is implementing these policies. Okay. That is what will take this country forward. Because, for example, if you want to, if your spouse want to add to what you dress, she should ensure that before you leave the house, she has participated in the choice of a tie that you are wearing, the choice of shoes that you are wearing. But she cannot wait for you until when you are out of the house and you are in the studio, then you say, but my husband, today you're not dressed, that dress is horrible, you are not dressed well. So as a country and as knowledgeable people like Suba Churchill, you must not put your intelligence and the wisdom to waste, but we must always participate in advancing your wisdom at the policy-making level so that this country can move forward.
I'll have to give Bwana Churchill an opportunity to respond.
Right of reply. I mean, you know, we are reading from the same page. The issue is not the what. What seems to be the contention is the how. We are all agreed that, you know, affordable housing is a good thing. Social health insurance fund is a good thing. We all know that, for example, that statistics from the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs tells us that 55% of people living in urban centers in Kenya live in the slums, 55%. And so one would wish that, you know, we all, you know, meet the requirements of Article 43 of the Constitution on decent housing, complete with sanitation and so on and so forth. The issue is the how. So that for me is rested. And all of us, or whether in the civil society, and of course, Honorable Didmas has his own, you know, a bit pessimistic views about the sector. But, you know, this country would not have made the kind of progress it has made without the civil society. Civil society basically means citizens. There is a difference between civil society and civil society organizations. Quite often people confuse the two. When you talk about civil societies, I mean the people of Kenya, even in their individual capacities. And this is a sector that, you know, brings into the economy. And if you look at the NGO Coordination Board report, annual report, attracted 188 billion into this economy. Not loans, but money that went into different sectors of the economy. And I would urge, you know, as lawmakers, they find it important to hold the executive responsible for the delay in implementing a law that was signed by President Mwai Kibaki way back in 2013, the Public Benefit Organizations Act, that can in turn create an enabling environment for this sector to thrive and even attract more. But having said that, you know, if you look at Article 203 of our Constitution, that talks about, you know, public finance and revenue sharing and allocation, it creates a criteria for determining what kind of priorities we pursue as a country. And the first criteria is the national interest. Then number two, it talks about any allocations that may have to be made on public debts, either owed by the national government or the county governments. Now, the problem with the Kenya Kwanza regime is that it has overthrown the first priority, national interest. And at the moment, I'll tell you, the national interest is not to pay debts. If I'm borrowing from his analogy of, you know, a family setup where, you know, people are preparing food, if you owe somebody, you know, assuming, you know, 5,000 shillings, and you have a family, and you owe somebody, and that's what you have. You have 5,000 shillings, yes, you are able to pay, but your family, yourself and your family risk going without food. I mean, what's wrong with telling the person that you owe that I have some money here, but my family also doesn't have food. I'm asking you to accept this 3,000 so that I can use the remaining 2,000 to buy food for my family. That is what we are asking of government. But it would be foolish if as a head of a family, you take all the 5,000, pay debts, look for the tallest building in town, and proclaim that you are the first to have, made Kenya debt-free. There is no country in the world. In fact, when I was coming and watching my colleagues, speak at the reception area, one of them indeed admitted that there is no country in the world that has no debts. There is no single moment, even at an individual level. At the moment, I owe some people some money. Others also owe me some money. And that's how life continues. But that can be what we are asking the government, and particularly His Excellency President William Ruto, is to go back to these people that we owe money and consider rescheduling some of these debts. There is no dignity in, starving Kenyans to death, overtaxing Kenya out of competition. 2 weeks ago, 3 banks released their, reports, financial reports. And these are banks that, do business across the region, the expanding East African region. They all did well in other countries except Kenya. From Equity, to KCB, they made profit. Their profits grew in Tanzania, in Sudan, South Sudan, and elsewhere, DRC, but their profits dipped in Kenya. What does that tell us? That President William Ruto and his regime has overtaxed Kenya out of competition. And now when banks begin to lay off, when banks like StanChart, release all their, treasury bills and say, we want nothing to do with this, what does it tell us? That, they are no longer going to be, lending government money because it does not make sense to them. And so these are the things we are talking about, that we are all agreed we need decent housing, but we must also recognize that given our socio-economic circumstances at this point in time, we may not be able, to at once ensure that every Kenyan out there, the 55% in urban areas living in slums, have housing, because the reality is that those houses will not be dished out for free.
Okay.
Exactly.
And Bwana Ruku, I'm looking at one of the questions asked in this TIFA poll, and it's, what do you think is the greatest challenge facing the Ruto Kenya Kwanza government at the moment? And the highest, of course, is inflation and cost of living. 84%, and if you look, it's been captured on the front pages of the Daily Nation and other papers as well. 84% of Kenyans believe the current economic conditions have worsened compared to last year. 87% of Kenyans who have, that's a number of people who have had to cut down on personal expenditure due to the hard times. The president on Jamhuri Day came and said, while addressing the nation, that we are now in a better place. We are out of the debt crisis. That relief is yet to be felt by Kenyans. And the general expectation is that if at all there was any relief, we would feel some sense of it. Today is the 14th of December. EPRA is going to release its latest fuel pricing model. Mm-hmm. When are Kenyans expected to get any relief? Because it's one thing to say we are okay, but if we're not feeling like we are okay, mm-hmm. then it doesn't matter.
We have a trend. When President William Ruto was sworn in, the first 5 months, 5, 6, 7 months, there was a question whether he's the legitimate president of the Republic of Kenya. There was a big section of this country which believed that President Ruto is not the legitimate president, and they should have ways and means of getting out of the office. That came and ended. Now everybody, including Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka, know that President William Ruto is indeed the head of state and head of government, and is so legitimately, according to our constitution. Everyone. And I'm sure even my brother Chachi here, 5 months down to the presidency of William Ruto, he had questions whether he's truly the president of Kenya. At the moment, there are questions whether President William Ruto is going to take this country out of the economic turmoils which we are facing at the moment. And that is now the debate, whether we are in the right direction. That's why we are having this kind of pause. And I can assure you, by the time we are getting to the month of July next year, when we'll be going to the next financial year, when we'll be passing the next financial bill in Parliament, most of Kenyans will be saying, indeed, the economy has started showing up.
Is that the time and when we should expect any relief as Kenyans?
Yes.
Next year, July?
Around there. That
Up
is
until
when.
then, no relief.
No. Let me.
I mean, the goalpost has been changing. It was 90 days.
Okay.
Then 1 year. Today we are told it is 3 years.
Let him finish then.
I'm trying to create my argument. So it is true. Most of the Kenyans are feeling the pinch of a number of things which are happening in the country. But one of the things which we have to address, and which I'm sure the government of William Ruto is going to address, and which is making many Kenyans even feel the pain economically, is the cost of power in the country. President William Ruto said he's going to bring down the cost of unga. And true to it, it took government when the price of unga was about 260, 240, 250, around there. But at the moment, if you go to many supermarkets, many brands are below 200 bob. That's a fact. Now, the cost of power in the Republic of Kenya, this economy has the highest prices of power within the region. We have to ask ourselves why. And this is what the president and his government must address. Once that is addressed, because we are talking about IPPs, independent power producers, we are talking about the products which are used in power connectivity, like transformers, which are so expensive in this country compared to other nations. We are talking about meters, power meters, which are so expensive compared to other countries. We are talking about conductors, which are so expensive, and we don't manufacture any of these products. So the government, and I'm sure this is going to happen, President must find a way of bringing manufacturing companies into this country so that we can be able to do manufacturing for transformers locally, of meters locally, of conductors locally, and even export to other regions so that we can bring down the cost of power. Number two, Kenyan power must be structured in such a way that it can't be the only monopoly in terms of power connectivity, connection of power to the household. That an engineer to go and connect power to your house will make about 7 facets, which cost money to the institution.
Okay.
So let's see how the engineers can only make 1 or 2 facets to your house for you to get connected to the house. Okay. So we have to find ways of restructuring Kenya Power, rethinking the business model, in such a way that we can even contract agents under the Kenya Power who can compete, but all of them paying Kenya Power, but they are competing in terms of connectivity. Why is it that we have so many villages?
The question
why is it that we have so many villages in Kenya without power? It's because of the cost of
the
connecting.
question is, and people agree that we are heading in the wrong direction. If you think otherwise, that we are not heading in the wrong direction, we're actually headed in the right direction, when do you expect there to be relief for Kenyans?
I want to agree with Kenyans and with this poll that taking a snapshot of our country in where to stand today here, a Kenyan will say we are headed to the wrong direction. I say so because money is not circulating in the pockets of Kenyans. You will agree with me that the biggest injector of money into the economy, into the pockets of Kenyans, is government. They do so by 1, paying salaries, 2, by paying contractors who are contracting the roads. As we speak today, the government of Kenya has not paid very many road constructors, amounting to more than 500 billion. This money is supposed to be circulating into the pockets of Kenyan people, and including even in our banks. We need to have had also another money in terms of billions of shillings circulating somewhere. They are building a road here, building a hospital here, and the same money now is circulating in the pockets of the Kenyan people. Now, because of the debts, the Eurobond which we have to pay by early next year, the government is readjusting in terms of saying, let us hold on in paying this pending bill for a short period of time, because they have renegotiated with China, who have agreed to give us money to do our roads, to sort out our pending bills on the roads. So by March next year, when this money now, the pending bills will be paid, when now the major capital projects that requires billions of shillings to be implemented, when they will be flagged out, then this money will be circulating in the Kenyan economy. Mama Mboga will feel it, Boda people will feel it. But as we speak today, they are not feeling it because a road contractor who is doing a road around their home has not been paid money. That is basically, the definition of government being the principal injector of money into the pockets of the Kenyan people by funding.
Because of time, I'll give you each an opportunity to give your final remarks. And yes, now at least we have different timelines. July next year, March next year. What are so much?
Nothing of that sort is happening soon, because you can see the signs. President William Ruto likes to liken himself to the late President Mwai Kibaki, because he inherited a government that he says was depleted, had no resources. But when Kibaki came in, there are certain things he did. He came up with economic stimulus package. And within this package were projects that were even taken up to the constituency level to increase production. I remember, fish ponds and all manner of projects. I remember tax incentives. The surest way of putting money into people's pockets is taxing them less. You tax them less, they're left with some loose change to go into a restaurant and buy something to eat. Today, you walk into the city and go into some of the social places that people used to fill to capacity, to the brim on Fridays, and you find 2 or 3, customers. 2 weeks ago, I entered into a restaurant and I wanted to watch news at 9 o'clock. And when I asked for, some cup of tea and whatever snacks they had, the waiter pleaded with me to even buy a meal and take home. Reason, the previous day, the owner of the restaurant had only managed to give them 50 shillings to get back home. That's from the sales they had made, the limited sales. And he said, if I don't buy anything better than the tea and snacks I wanted to take, they are likely to get another 50 shillings to enable them, without bothering how they come back the following day. Now, when people are faced with such, how much tax can you collect from such a restaurant? And so we are saying that looking at the policies of government, and especially on taxing, and everything that needs to be levied, and our president has gone out there even suggesting that we tax carbon. I'm sure the next thing would be taxing oxygen. So depending on how much oxygen you draw from the atmosphere, chances are that you'll soon be imposed with the tax and so on and so forth. So moving forward, the president ought to sit down and reflect. Unfortunately, those who are closer to the president tell us that he only listens to his own voice. And therefore, given those circumstances and the fact that the president seems to only listen to the echo of his own voice, there is no chance whatsoever that in the next 1 year, or even much as Mheshimiwa is suggesting, that there will be a relief for Kenyans.
Wow. No relief coming anytime soon. Ruto.
My brother Chachi is a layman when it comes to carbon issues. He's a pedestrian when it comes to carbon issues, because I've been in carbon market from 2009. And I know when the president is talking about carbon tax and what Church is referring are two different issues. South Africa is one of the economies which has a carbon tax registration, and I can assure you Kenya will be the second in the coming years. I don't want to get into those details because those are issues to do with the climate change, and there is a way of packaging a carbon tax, and I can assure you it will be beneficial to the economy of the Republic, because we are not talking about taxing me and you as Kenyans, individual Kenyans. We are talking about if it's Mercedes, us, the number of Mercedes-Benzes which are operating in the Republic of Kenya, how much tax are we collecting from the company?
Okay.
How much carbon tax are we collecting from Toyota? How much tax are we collecting from Nissan as a company? We need to earn some money for those manufacturing companies which are manufacturing their vehicles in their economies, and they come here and they pollute our environment. We need to earn some resources which will help us building our green pathways, which will help us in climate-proofing our infrastructure. We have seen what El Nino has done to our roads. If those roads were climate-proofed from carbon money raised from these manufacturing companies, then we will not be having this kind of problem. You know. So, but now, my brother Churchill think that the carbon tax will go and tax Mama Mboga.
Okay. We know how it gets transferred to the ultimate consumer.
We don't have time to
the driver.
So,
unfortunately, yes.
Let's not trivialize some of these issues. If you don't know something, just say you don't know. You better go and get some lectures on that issue. Then you come and talk. So, having said that, it is true. This government, Kenya Kwanza government, inherited 700 and something, 705, 710 billion Kenya shilling owned by Kenyan contractors. We don't have that kind of money to pay the Kenyan contractors. But as my brother said, from March next year, February next year, all contractors in the Republic of Kenya will be back on site. And this will reject a lot of resources, money circulation within the economy, to re-energize, to create another, we call it impetus as far as the economy is concerned. Okay. It's a huge amount of money. Many contractors have been auctioned. Many families have sold all their properties for them not to be auctioned because of the money owed by county government, money owed by government. And the other thing is we have county governments which have taken completely wrong direction. We have county government which have allocated governor office a budget of about 400 million every year. Money which you cannot point any project which is done. It's money for eating mandazi and traveling and, I don't know, tents, such kind of things. So we need to look also to the way our county government are spending some of these resources. And any county which is allocating itself even 200 million a year as an expense from governor's office, they are doing a disservice to the people of the Republic of Kenya.
Finally, you have a minute or so.
I think I want to say this, Ndimuli, that we took over a dilapidated economy from the previous regime. It should not be seen to be, a complete weakness because government exists in perpetuity. We need to pick it up from where we found it and they take it like an opportunity for Kenya Kwanza government to shine. You only shine as government when you were able to address the issues that were unable to be addressed by your predecessors. And going forward, it is more important that both the two levels of government should audit their expenditure and their systems and implement austerity measures so that we have more money available for development than more money available for recurrent expenditure and the things that don't excite the person in the Kenyan people. Lastly, I want to appeal to Treasury and Central Bank to take care of the interest of very many Kenyans who have taken loans with different banks. Of course, with this increased taxation in terms of housing levy and other issues, it means therefore that Kenyans who are already servicing loans and they had committed more than 2/3 of their pay slips on those kind of things, they will be left with nothing. And I think this is not the time to actually increase any interest on money on the loan that Kenyans will get from the banks. And if it happens, it should not affect those who are already servicing these loans. And the banks should therefore also sit down with the employers, those who are who are on check-off system, also to renegotiate, to restructure the loans that individual Kenyan workers owe to these banks, to ensure that there is something left on their payslip, because this is our country, this is our economy, we have to construct it, we should stop blame games and incorporate each and every view that will make us advance forward to reconstruct our punctured economy for the better of this country.
Thank you so much, Didbas Barasa, MP Kimilili, Geoffrey Ruku, MP Mbeere North, and Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center. Our panelists this morning as we take a look at the state of the nation, big headlines, and that poll by the TIFA Research Company. Let's go to the editorial comment this morning. Now, the absence of key regional leaders at Kenya's 60th Independence Day celebrations on Jamhuri Day earlier this week raised significant questions about the country's current standing within the East African region. The non-appearance of presidents from neighboring countries like Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan, and Somalia, despite some of them sending representatives, signifies a subtle yet conspicuous shift in regional dynamics. Kenya's efforts to foster stronger ties and maintain diplomatic relations within its neighboring nations have been evident through President William Ruto's recent visits to these countries. His presence at Uganda's 60th independence anniversary last year and multiple visits to Kampala and to Tanzania underscore Kenya's recognition of these nations as crucial trade partners. However, the absence of reciprocal gestures during Kenya's milestone celebration hints at possible nuances in regional relations. It may imply evolving geopolitical dynamics or internal priorities that affect regional diplomatic engagement. Kenya's decision to remove visa requirements for all visitors entering the country showcases a proactive stance towards enhancing international relations. However, the snub by neighboring heads of state raises questions about Kenya's current influence and position within the region. President Ruto's efforts in engaging with neighboring countries remains commendable.